Hey folks, so this was supposed to go out a couple days ago, but my poor old computer was having a hard time dealing with the 20 gigabytes of video to edit. So yeah, thanks for the input on the last video too. I condensed this one down quite a bit considering the first one was 17 minutes to cut and glue 3 pieces of balsa together, which is a bit much. In the last video I was just about to make the wing, so that's what we're doing here, just tracing and cutting, pretty simple stuff. The sheet of balsa was not quite wide enough to get the wingtips in, so I used the wing and the wing template to create a little wingtip template to finish the wings all together. Once the wingtips are glued in place, it's sanding time. Not trying to make an actual airfoil or anything, just getting everything even and rounding the edges a bit to help the airflow. Cutting out the elevons. If I had been thinking, I would have cut them out at an angle to give myself a little bevel, but I didn't, so I just sand one in later. Also trim a little bit of the ends off of the elevon so they don't hang up on anything while they're moving, and the wings are done. Giving myself just a little bit of help here with the line that follows the center of the fuselage piece, which will just help keep things in line when I glue the wings on. Give the wings a little bit of a tweaking to follow the fuselage contour, which gives it just a slight airfoil rather than just being flat. And a little more liberal with the glue here. This is definitely not a joint you want failing. I'm cutting out the fuselage top deck again, and cutting it properly this time. Same front to back taper as the bottom piece to match it. Once this is glued in, it'll really help stiffen up the entire thing. I'll probably also add a couple little bits of balsa here and there to help brace things up. Slight bending to match the curve of the fuselage. Had to wet the back part that curves much sharper, but I didn't really wet it enough, and so the balsa started to crease rather than bend, which is better than it breaking, but it just doesn't look quite as smooth, but I should be able to sand it back some. Gluing in that little bit of balsa that'll wrap around the motor and finally finish the bottom part of the plane, and then cutting a little hole in the fuselage so the motor leads can poke through and get to the speed controller. Before gluing the motor in though, I have to modify the shroud a little bit. They work best if it's got a nice rounded intake lip, but that wasn't exactly possible here, so I just cut and sanded the leading edge of the shroud as much as I could to give it as smooth as airflow transition as possible. I also wanted to remove the little tail cone, as I was curious about its weight, and after getting it off and weighing it, I decided to make a new one out of balsa. Grabbed a balsa square stick and used the original cone as a template by basically just smashing it into the end to make an imprint, and then just shaved it down and sanded it smooth. The printed one was 0.73 grams and the balsa one was 0.12 after hollowing it out a bit. Every tenth counts. And once that was done, it was just a matter of gluing it in place, taking extra care not to get any glue where I didn't want it. Once the EDF was done, I could finally glue it into the fuselage and then glue down the little balsa flap to cover the whole thing. I wetted this piece out with hot water, so no creases this time and no cracks. Bends much better. And cutting out the little bit of excess to complete the bend around the shroud. This was a little trickier than I was expecting, but I managed to get it pretty smooth and nothing a little more sandpaper can't fix. There will be a thrust cone installed later, so the airflow is not going to be coming out of that big hole. Cutting out those little strips for reinforcing the wing root glue joint, as well as a couple little braces to help stiffen everything up. It shouldn't take much, and I really don't want to add any more weight than I need to right now. Laying out the electronics finally. I'll have to do some test throws with everything in place to make sure I've got the CG right. It's a tight squeeze in there, but I've had tighter. Then cutting and sanding the bevel into the elevons. X-Acto blade is getting a little dull. And then making a hole for the elevon linkage, as well as a slot in the bottom deck for the control horns to be placed. And then just cutting out a little support for the back piece after cutting that big old slot out of there. Got a little weak. And that's about it for this one. Next video should come out sooner than it took this one to, and I should have the electronics installed for that one. And then after that, it's a couple little odds and ends and chuck the thing in the air and hope for the best. Thanks for watching.